Hi everybody, it's time for another Chess Bootcamp Live member game analysis. I've pulled up 3 games from our member Mr. Jive Guy, who's rated around in the 800 to 900 rating. I've pulled up his last 3 rapid losses, and we're just going to play through and try and spot typical errors in this. So game 1, e4, e5, ooh, the wayward queen attack. Okay, and there's a couple of ways to defend against this. This is not uncommon at the beginner level, has been played at high levels. This is okay. d6 defends the pawn, because that's the real threat here, is that the queen comes over and captures the pawn with check. You don't want that. A better move is probably knight to c6, and the reason is because it's developing. You're getting the piece out into the board, getting some more control over the centre. And also, this move does block in the dark square bishop. We have a check, and here again we've got options. We can defend against the check with development, with this, or there's pawn to c6. Here we play the knight out. Now that invites an exchange. Okay, and we have the exchange. This isn't too bad for black, because he's captured with the pawn towards the centre. We have d3 from white. And now f6, knight to f6 is playable, hitting the queen and saying go away, queen. Queen now moves across, kind of threatening this, although it's developed by, protected by the bishop. So you don't want to move the bishop now. Okay, we have h6 now hitting the queen. Again, now this is a potential weakness maybe later on in the game, but we will see. So the queen moves back, maintaining the threat against g7, which means that this bishop is still tied to the defensive there, and we push in the middle with d5. Now everybody, a little shaking there. Here d4 is very tempting to hit the queen one more time and kind of clamp down on the centre. Also notice that white only has a dark square bishop now, so putting your pawns on dark squares, removing dark squares from that bishop is a good thing. Excellent. The queen is now hit again. So now white really is starting to pay the price in development for the early queen development. Okay, so here we go. Bishop comes out to e6. This is okay. It's a defended square. This pawn, notice, is undefended. Black now plays c4. So there's the opportunity of an en passant here, but it's probably not a good idea. You want to keep that pawn on the dark square. Also takes this square away from the knight. Okay, so the bishop comes out. Maybe not the ideal square for the bishop because it's really staring at the back of its own pawn's head. An alternative here, as the sun goes behind a cloud, maybe a5 with the idea of putting the bishop there, but that's relatively... Oh no, it can't be blocked by the knight. So maybe something like this, and putting the bishop on a much more threatening square. That would have actually won material. And now we have b4 from white, so kicking the bishop away. Bishop comes back, and now c5 traps the bishop. Okay, so that's relatively easy to calculate. It's only a couple of moves, and now the bishop is lost, and now recapture with the c-pawn. Yeah, okay. So we've lost a piece for the sake of a pawn. White develops here. Bishop comes out. It's not a pin on the knight, but white is really only going to castle that way. So here, to take the knight and force that would be not bad for black. But there you see, this undefended pawn. And that now comes also with a threat on the bishop. The bishop is defended by the knight, but there's another threat here. Can you see the other threat that black's missed? Okay, there it is. Yeah, white spotted it. Grabbing another pawn with a fork on queen and rook. So here we lose the rook. Might have been tempted there to capture with a rook, but capturing with the queen's okay. Bishop comes out here now attacking an undefended pawn. And it seems again we've missed the threat. We've dropped another pawn now. So now we're actually 7 material points down. Queen attacks the bishop. White now castles, missing the threat on the bishop, and drops the bishop. So we've recovered a little bit here. Now this is important because here the rook is actually undefended, and moving the knight out here with development blocks the attack on the rook. It also means that the rooks are now connected, which is decent. Okay, and now we have two attackers on the knight, and white defends by moving the rook to the open file. That's a decent move. Here, you might be tempted to have a look at knight takes there, but then knight can recapture. The pawn can't recapture because queen takes queen. The queen is undefended, but yeah, knight could capture here, and then there's no advantage gained. So the bishop now comes back. Kind of looking at this, but it's defended twice. And these pawns on light squares are making life harder for the light squared bishop. Rook comes across to the semi-open file. Queen now puts herself in line with the rook. Now that would seem to me to invite d4. So I'd kind of be tempted to keep my queen here and maintain the pin, the absolute pin on this pawn. And yeah, d4 comes now, and now white is really pushing back and gaining control over the center there. Okay, h3 is played. Now there's a possibility of a sacrifice here, with bishop takes, pawn takes, queen takes, and then maybe the knight coming in with a checkmating threat. Oh, we get it, good, good, good. Now the pawn comes in now, definitely knight to g4. Okay, and we've got a serious threat here. So what does black do here? Pushes forwards. Now we're going to have queen h2 check. Yeah, queen h2. There is an escape for the king. King goes there. So now what do we do? We can't capture on here because of the queen. So could we deflect the queen somehow? It's not obvious, and we're down a full rook still at this point. So we throw in the check, but it's kind of toothless. Now the queen has to move because the queen's under attack from the rook, and can't come here because king just takes, can't come here because knight takes. So the queen comes back, pawn takes, king takes, and now this king is really running away to safety. So we didn't, it was an interesting idea with the bishop sack, but it wasn't a conclusive win. You do have queen to there with check, but the king can move away, or rook can block, or knight can block, or queen can block. Definitely ideas there. Queen comes back now. Queen here with check, also hitting the knight. So really the king's going to have to move now. King goes back to g8, and now we hit the queen. Queen steps forward now, attacking the rook, and we missed again the threat. So so a few things we've definitely spotted with this. Let's just review again. Good, decent, strong position here. But yeah, I mean, allowing the bishop to be trapped here. You just have to say, if I do this move, this is a rapid game, this is a 30-minute game, we've only used a minute and a half, and here, what is my opponent's best move? It's not too difficult to spot the trap there. So definitely we've seen a few weaknesses in that. Okay, now we have the white pieces on game 2. We have d4, d5, and the queen's gambit with c4. Queen's gambit accepted. Knight out to c3. Bishop comes out now. This isn't a fantastic square for the bishop. It's defending this pawn, but the pawn's not actually attacked yet. It could be if the e-pawn moves, so e3 or e4. But it does block in this pawn. e4 comes. Very decent move. And now we're threatening d5, which hits the bishop and stops the bishop from defending this pawn. So knight comes, but now here we walk straight into a pawn fork. Okay, so here yeah, the opportunity very simply to push d5, hitting both the knight and the bishop would have won material. So here I think there may be an element of white, Mr. Jive Guy, focusing too much on his own side of the board and failing to spot the opponent's mistake there. And now the bishop comes out of the potential fork. Here again, h3, it's very tempting just to kick the attacker that's pinning the knight, but again, I think try and develop when you can to achieve what you need to do. What you want to do here is you want to get rid of the pin. So I think bishop e2 would have been pretty good there. There's also a threat here with the knight and the queen both looking at this pawn. So here, even with this, potentially knight takes, and this knight can't recapture because the queen's just lost. So here, now the bishop takes. We should probably recapture. Yeah, you see we've got an issue now with two attackers on this pawn already. So you can simply recapture with the queen, but here we take with the pawn. The pawn should now fall. Yeah, pawn falls. And now we grab that pawn back from the start, and the knight retreats. Okay, so we're down one pawn at this point in time. Trading queens probably isn't advisable at this point, because the rook can simply capture. So we bring out the bishop. That's a nice developing move. Now if the queens trade off, then this pawn is actually undefended. So, yep, we have a trade of queens. This pawn's now hanging, and black is not able to castle because he can't go that way because the rook's guarding this square. White has a nice lead in development but needs to get the king safe. And that's not going to be straightforward because castling this side isn't ideal. We've also got an undefended pawn here. Rook comes across, do we trade rooks? We trade rooks. Okay, now we can grab the pawn. Right. Yeah, I think I would have just taken the free stuff there at that point. King moves across. Okay, pawn comes forward, evading the attack. King moves across again. Black still has an issue with development, although is up one pawn. Might be tempted to move this rook all the way across to d1. And see, this knight actually has no squares to go to. So the king is stuck defending that knight. Bishop blocks isn't possible. Okay, good. Rook d1. Yeah, I like that. Bishop comes back defending the knight now. Okay. Now what would I be doing here? We have a distinct lead in development. I think what I would be thinking about now is just throwing these pawns up the middle of the board. Get them all up there, try and remove these pawns, and don't give black the chance to castle. Knight here, we could take it off with the bishop and open up the king side. Knight here, we can hit with the pawn. So bishop comes in now. This is interesting. Okay, so we've got a double attack now on the knight. It's defended twice, but it does again mean the king can't move away. The knight comes out, hit the knight, which is what we said, and this is interesting. So now the knight's attacking the bishop, and we've missed it. We've just missed the attack, but so did black. Black had the opportunity to capture the bishop for free there. I might be tempted to put my bishop here now, and if bishop takes, pawn takes, and we've got a threatening pawn deep in black's territory. Okay, so again we've missed the fact that the bishop's hanging. Rook to g1, it makes sense. We are putting the rook in line with the king. That's okay. Now at some point, you might think about knight in here, but it's guarded currently by knight and bishop. This pawn is actually still pinned. And again, black misses the hanging piece. King moves again, and now black finally sees the hanging piece. So you've got to spot, right? When are my pieces undefended? When are my pieces under attack? And now we're -4 in material again. Also, black's got a lot of pawns on light squares here, which is much better for a dark squared bishop, but worse for a light squared bishop. So here still I would be thinking about throwing pawns up as a general idea. Rook moves again, but that's not really an attack on this knight. Knight comes in. Okay, we're not worried about this fork because the pawn's guarding that square, but it's nice to see the f-pawn moving up. However, it's moved up onto a square where it can simply be taken. So, yeah, black grabs the free stuff, moves in here with a fork. This is nice, but this pawn is actually defended by the knight right now, so black doesn't have to do anything in particular. Bishop comes back now and onto a square where it's hanging, with 7 minutes 49 left on a 10-minute game, and we drop another piece. Okay, so that's definitely something to be watching out for, Mr. Jive Guy. Do not put your pieces on squares where they are hanging and undefended. So let's not see the end of that one. Let's move on to game number 3, and still looking for the same kind of patterns. Okay, here again we've got the black pieces e4, e5, normal opening, the Italian, and d6. This is not a conventional move. Yes, we're defending this pawn, but the pawn was already defended once by the knight, so that really wasn't needed. You could have moved the bishop to here. It's called the Gioco Piano, where it's attacking f2, a sensitive place. This one I'm not convinced by. d3 now builds the light square pawn chain now that the bishop is out, and it unleashes this bishop. b6 now, maybe getting ready for a fianchetto, but again, there's a light square pawn chain, so really this bishop would much rather be on the other side of that pawn chain, rather than on the outside of it. So knight comes in now with the threat on here. Yeah, and this is an issue because sometimes you can play d5 in these cases, but you can't now because the bishop's in the way. So what do we do? Queen to there. This is tricky because, you know, even pushing the pawn forwards to save the pawn, the knight can still come in with a fork on queen and rook. So knight comes in anyway, attacking the rook that can't move. Bishop to here now, and we attack the queen. Wow. Now the queen actually only has one safe square to go to, which is f8. Queen goes to f8 and we lose the rook. Hit the bishop. Now we'd like to have ideas about developing the knight somehow, and with a discovery on that one. The knight now escapes. Knight here, we don't really want to be... Oh, yes. Okay, just missing a threat. Right, you have to say to yourself, what has changed with that move? Well, my queen is now under attack. In fact, is the queen here trapped? I believe the queen is actually trapped in that instance. Yeah. So very, very nasty. So let's go back to the start of this, because I think this bishop move is really the start of black's woes here. Another idea here is just the kind of anti-fried liver with h6, just preventing the knight from coming in there. But this move, it breaks a bunch of opening principles because you're blocking in this pawn and thereby blocking in this bishop here. But also you're preventing the d5 response to the fried liver as well. This move again wasn't really doing anything, so we've got a threat here of the knight coming in, and that's something that we really need to deal with. So for example, and also because of d3, the queen is not now defending that square because the bishop is guarding it. So here I would say h6, even f6, but ideally h6 here just to prevent the knight from coming in. And now the knight comes in, and it's already a very, very difficult situation. So that's something that I would definitely recommend. Look into this potential fried liver situation from the Italian game. It's a basic Italian game. Knight here isn't great because it still allows this idea. So yeah, but so that's something I would advise, is to look into the fried liver attack and how to defend against it. h6 is pretty straightforward. But more than anything else, just slowing down and taking your time on every move to say, okay, what changed? Which of my pieces are under attack? Which of my pieces are undefended? And that will definitely help you go quite a way on that. So that's my quick review, Mr. Jive Guy's games. Basic discipline, really. That's all I can say. Just, yeah, like we say, look at every move and tell yourself what changed on that move, right? And again, just trying to follow opening principles generally in this, because that's a very, very questionable move. You've got to be looking at what are the potential threats here. You've got a bishop looking at f7. Is there anything else that can target f7? Yes, well, this knight can come in via here if the d-pawn moves. And as soon as the d-pawn moves, you've got to switch on to that, because the knight can now come into your camp. So I think h6 there would probably be absolutely fine. So yeah, some tough ones there. But you know, this is not untypical at the 800 to 900 band. But yeah, that's my basic advice. Just really slowing down on every move. Make sure you say to yourself, why did my opponent do that? Try and come up with an answer, and identifying all the threats in your position potentially before you decide what your candidate moves are, because we've definitely left a lot of pieces hanging that simply didn't need to be lost. Okay, so I hope that's useful, Mr. Jive Guy. Thanks everyone else for watching, and I'll see you soon.